Once upon a time, in a land far away, lived a kind-natured maiden called Cinderella. She was fair and gentle and lived with her stepmother. Cinderella played in the field with the horses and the mice. One day, a young man came into the open field. He loved to play soccer. His father, the king, expected him to find a princess and get married. But sadly, he was not interested in marrying any of the princesses. No, Prince Charming simply loved to play soccer. So he took every chance he could to play. As Cinderella and the prince played happily with their friends, they suddenly realised they were not alone in the field. The prince kicked his ball into Cinderella. Startled Cinderella dropped her wreath of flowers, wondering why on earth he had kicked a ball at her. The young prince made a pose and then offered her a rose. She heard the hustle and bustle of Portia and Grimelda, her stepsisters, coming from the garden. The prince picked up his ball, summoned his royal guard, wrote "I love you" on the ball, and then he disappeared into the bushes. Portia and Grimelda were bossy. One demanded that Cinderella brush her hair. The other insisted that Cinderella paint her fingernails. Portia took the wreath of flowers that were placed on her head, and then Grimelda took the rose which she was holding and danced around pretending it was a handsome prince. Their wicked stepmother handed Cinderella a broom and insisted that she sweep the footpath, and the three wicked women followed her, nagging and bossing her all around. Meanwhile, the king and the queen arrived. The prince explained how he had met a lovely young maiden, how he liked her better than the princesses who spent far too much time fussing about their designer gowns and their perfect hair. He said that he refused to marry a princess, but instead wanted to marry a lovely, sweet-natured young girl from the village. Of course, the king was horrified. As he stormed around panicking, the queen calmly devised a plan. She whispered into her husband's ear, suggesting that every maiden in the kingdom be invited to the ball. The king wondered how on earth he could tell the neighbouring kings that his son was going to choose a commoner over a princess. The prince came up with a brilliant idea. He suggested that the ball should be a masked ball and that all the eligible ladies could have the opportunity to win the prince's heart based on their gentleness and kindness, not on their beautiful appearance and gorgeous gowns. If no one could see her face, it would be her gracefulness, her personality and her pure heart that would shine through. The king and queen soon agreed that the idea was brilliant. The king demanded that the guards of the royal court deliver invitations to every maiden in the land. The trumpet was blown, and everyone from kilometres around came to hear the royal news. Of course, the wicked stepmother, Portia and Grimelda, pushed and shoved their way to the front of the line to make sure that they did not miss out. As people lined up to collect their invitations, however, Cinderella was not there. The mice carefully snuck up behind the royal guard and knocked him flying and took an invitation. The mice carried their invitation as fast as their little feet could scurry all the way back to Cinderella's home. But then a mystery woman came in. She collected the very last invitation, but I think you all know who she was. Cinderella was holding her royal invitation as the nasties came through the door. The wicked family returned and laughed in Cinderella's face because they knew that she had not been invited to the ball. The wicked stepmother ripped the invitation out of her hand and tore it into tiny little pieces. They laughed and laughed as they went off to prepare for the magnificent ball. But Cinderella sobbed uncontrollably on the floor. Suddenly, the mystery woman entered the room. She whispered into Cinderella's ear and handed her a fresh invitation. Cinderella ran off to find her friends the mice and share the good news. The mystery woman was Cinderella's fairy godmother. She summoned the royal horses to come and take Cinderella to the ball. As she waited for the horses to arrive at the ball, the royal horses pranced around the garden, proud to deliver Cinderella to the ball, and then the mice were summoned as her coachmen. The fairy godmother explained to the mice and the horses that they needed to get Cinderella out of the ballroom before the last stroke of midnight. Finally, Cinderella appeared in her beautiful gown that had been given to her by the fairy godmother. They swiftly left the village and set off on their way for the castle. Meanwhile, at the ball, the king and queen watched on as the prince met all of his prospective brides. The first princess was struggling to dance in her fancy shoes. The next princess was struggling to breathe in her fancy gown. The third princess was clumsy and awkward. As each of the rejected princesses danced with the other gentlemen of the court, along came the women of the village. The first was Portia, who kept stepping on his toes. Grimelda was such a bad dancer that she kept bumping into him. The wicked stepmom was not going to miss her chance, so she danced with him as well. The prince promptly rejected her, so she took her chance with the king. Of course, the queen was less than impressed. The prince could not find a bride worthy of his dreams. Then in walked Cinderella. Instantly he knew that he had found his bride. They danced for hours. Uh-oh, it was midnight. Cinderella took off her shoe and left it behind. She quickly left the palace and returned to her home. The king and the prince found the shoe. They devised a plan. Every woman in the kingdom should try on this tiny glass slipper, and the girl that fitted into the shoe would be his bride. One by one, the ladies lined up to see if the shoe would fit. The wicked stepsisters tried the shoe on, however, it did not fit. And as they reached the end of the line, things did not look hopeful. The wicked sisters tried the shoe on twice, but without luck, the prince collapsed on the floor, gave up, thinking that his maiden from the field had disappeared. And then in came Cinderella. The wicked stepmother panicked. She grabbed the shoe and she threw it away, and the shoe smashed. The fairy godmother produced a second slipper. Cinderella put the second slipper on. The prince had found his bride. Everyone cheered. They knew they'd found their queen, and they all lived happily ever after.